Te Tumu and taking infrastructure out there. There's Uripa and Wāhi Tapu out there that it'll encroach upon. Same back towards going Tauranga and all that. Yeah, there's additional Wāhi Tapu and Uripa, and I think that is a sort of a protection measure for us, just to make sure that we, as we're developing the path of the infrastructure, we can see Uripa coming up and maybe be able to veer it off somewhere, just thinking out aloud.
I think it's inherently cultural heritage planning problem that we have in the city, and that's you go through the motions of getting these things on promulgated draft plans, and they get removed, going through this public notification process. And I can say that a number of sites that we achieved to identify get removed through the process, and that's a huge problem. So we can lock them in terms of identification, but the verification process of those can be intrusive if there's a requested archaeological authority to investigate, and you've got private landowner kind of permission too. Because I've been up to, we've got Pukepoto, and just last week, because council have removed it from the promulgated draft plan, site M54, Ngaitiahi, never made it on to the finalised plan. It's even though the developer knew it was there, council just went up there and put the digger through, just last week, and because it's not on their plan anymore. So it's there, things are real, sites, still visible sites are there. It happens quite often, and I'm kind of struggling to see why this is here and it's not better understood when we're looking into how the linkages are within the system around the identification of that. Because it's not that we're not willing to share and uphold the information, it's whether the process allows us to effectively provide this mechanism so they are not disturbed. We just look at the current plan change 33 and what I've had to make a response with regards to that. No expert witnesses looked at the any cultural aspects to it, but cultural view shafts and enabling underutilisation or enabling Māori land. There are no experts around that, and quite an important process for us around the intensification. So all that's going to lead to is more disturbance. Like I can just So I think there's needs to, if we're looking at that and we're looking at the identification of sites, section 6E RMA, we may have to look under the new legislation too around that, and look at ways around how they look at the fourth schedule, part 2, parts 1 and 2, around cultural redress. It's spelt out there, offset compensation to support the effects-based void remedy mitigation approach to addressing environmental effects. So I think that that a lot of this would rely on planning expertise in terms of the mechanism to actually make it work. And we need some cultural policy analyst or something. Council needs some. We were talking about it the other day. Yeah, to talk amongst you, so when they present their reports, they're not misrepresenting the information, or it's more well put out to the decision makers if they've got that that steering guidance in house. Yeah.
So just taking that a bit further, Des, is that, in your view, a need somewhere in terms of, notwithstanding the any identification in the district plan, or indeed the lack of it through the RMA process, the need for the identification of Urupa and Waihi Tapu sites on some type of plan, so when the infrastructure planning is undertaken, it's those are clearly identified, whatever they might be.
Like the big generic stormwater out, they're doing all these inventories, but the cultural inventory is just as important. It's upheld just as significantly in the legislation as the wetlands are. So I think we need better information around. What I'm trying to say here is mainly is that there's too many loopholes in the process, in the planning process, that when trying to achieve this, that needs to be addressed. Yeah, because I think there needs to be more investment around the wording, so that the policy work, and more investment in the actual researching, and because we're losing. If you just look at go to HPT, Heritage New Zealand, you ask for the records, we're losing quite a few sites, and there's been no redress for this, and it could be all if that was to if there was a hard pressing issue where they had to destroy or modify, then you've taken that right to the last minute, and you have the ability to look at other planning instruments to address disturbance. At the moment, it's kind of just dealt with as it comes, and pretty much let's put a digger in there, put some fellas to keep an eye out and see what we can find. And like I said, I don't think it's enough. There's not enough investment into that inventory assessment work to be able to safely guarantee to the likes of the project managers that it's going to be okay. Because I know that in Te Manga, as it is with their pipeline where it is, it should be, and it is a priority, one of the KSRs, as the primary example for the business case.
Given what you have outlined, I just wonder though whether some of this is wider than the current business case in terms of wastewater, from an overall organisational council perspective, as opposed to just looking at it in a more narrow way from just the wastewater perspective. I don't know, Shad, if you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of understand the principle behind the KSF, which is to avoid and protect urupa, and in particular where they are known. You know, if at some point in the future the council decides to put in a new pipe somewhere else, or there's another scheme further down the coast, I'm sure there would be a lot of assessment work that would need to go into that to understand the particular route. And if there are known sites, then they should be avoided. So I think the principle of avoiding, well, particularly known, it is a challenge when we don't know where some of these things are. And it's really up to tangata whenua to disclose where they can and where they're comfortable about where some of these places are. But I do take the point in the critical success factor to not disturb these particular places. But I suppose, I mean, coming back to Wally's point, and also to Spencer, it's making sure that it's clear about what we mean in this particular section.
and achieving some of that clarification.
Yes, certainly, as the report indicates, that was our proposed approach with that one, is just to discuss further as a project team and try and sort of get clarification on those aspects, so that we can all be clear what we mean by it, what's okay and what's not.
Sorry, but I do want to acknowledge Des in Fitzy's corridor about cultural heritage and about how we protect and look after it, because it is, well, from my perspective and your perspective, is how do we protect and look after those things. We did put our city plan on hold. I do know we've got reports coming around priority plan changes, so there may be opportunity to feed in work around cultural heritage. So just kind of want to put that on your radar.
Yeah, I mean, and us as tangata whenua, I mean, this is an important take here, and we've got to get our heads around exposing where our sites are, I suppose, because we're stuck between a rock and a hard place, because when we've let out where sites are, they've been degraded and stuff like that, and then so it gets harder and harder to disclose where sites are. But it's a job for people like myself to talk our hapu, and to bring up the conversation and try and get them comfortable with letting you know where wāhi tapu sites are and that. That's going to be an ongoing discussion amongst whānau and hapu all the time, but like I said, it's up to the likes of us up here and some of the kaumātua to address it, because it can only help the city and us in the end if we, that's my personal opinion, if we disclose all our sites. Kia ora.
Oh, I'd just like to add that there's already been some disclosure in the promulgated draft plan, but subsequently about 80% of those sites were removed, but they still sit on the council file, public. And if you just start by putting those back on, well, I've actually seen quite a few of them being, I told you they were there, not exactly there, but in the vicinity, gone now. If the developer said, if I would have known, I wouldn't have had a big fallout with the bulk earthworks contracting, because it slows everything down if those preliminary works haven't been done. And it's the same again with infrastructure, especially dealing with wastewater. People a bit, whānau would be a bit, because you bring another element of wastewater if it's significant. So that's kind of another level of assessment too. Of disturbance.
And I think hence my comment that this is a matter that's wider than just the wastewater business case, and part of it seems to be also, and how, to be frank, this organisation might work through and consider and deal with and plan regarding cultural heritage matters. So that's why I think it's that wider organisational consideration in addition to the more focused wastewater CSF. Perhaps adding to some of the discussion or notation in the business case or wherever, the potential need for the organisation to look at it from a more holistic point of view, in addition from in addition to just the wastewater business case. Spencer.
I think there were 3 issues there. There is that broader cultural heritage, which I won't add my 10 cents worth into in this forum. There's future works that may impact on other wāhi tapu or urupa, which of course we don't know at this stage, but I think I agree with Shadrach that it's an important principle that those things are to be avoided rather than take practicable steps. I think that's watering it down a bit too much for my liking. But I think there is a third issue, which is in relation to the pipe that's already existing and future potential upgrades, additions, whatever they are to that, and I think that probably needs some specific wording on its own because it's already running through an urupa already. And I don't know whether there are any others that are impacted, but that, of course, being here on behalf of Ngā Pōtiki, that's the one I'm particularly concerned with. So I do think perhaps that needs to be treated on its own. Then there's this issue of the principle of avoiding future ones. And yeah, then there's the cultural heritage stuff for another day at another space.
Thanks, Spencer. And I think that's probably a good summary in terms of, for want of a better word, sort of segmenting in terms of that focus from the particular through to the more general. Shad.
Sorry, just it would be useful to understand, picking up Spencer's third point about the current pipe, and particularly from a Ngā Pōtiki perspective, the pipe's already there, and when the pipe went in, there was probably massive trenching that went through that urupa to lay the pipe, and whether there's any, so at some point, if the pipe needs to be upgraded or replaced, whether not trenching, but directional drilling, which will be a lot deeper than probably what the pipe is now, whether technology provides for those kinds of opportunities, given that there is still a urupa above. So it'd be useful, I think, for the team to have that conversation about the use of technology to avoid. Is it still avoiding if you're going 10, 20 metres below an existing urupa? It would be useful to kind of get that feedback, I think.
Okay. Anything further at this point on CSF 17? Jane or Wally, anything before we move on to the next one?
Just said a little
Des.
thing on maybe when they are existing, there needs to be some management structure around that. We got an issue, another one, but it's gone, and it's blue and it's scoured out the side of the par site, which is a cemetery, where you're going to have ongoing management issues because of this infrastructure. This is another one. There's going to be ongoing management issues. I think you need these opportunities to develop a specific plan, to address what is known now and what the current operations are. If they could help in the segmented approach to the... And I agree with Spence, though. I just want to reiterate that the word avoids just... when you're dealing with the nature of that, it's probably the best word to put forward. Yeah, because otherwise we're especially with wāhi tapu and urupa, that's I just like to support that.
For the project team to have a look at, and also including what Des has just outlined in terms of any potential subsequent management arrangements. Okay, so going to the third matter, and this relates to CSF 10, must not discharge wastewater directly to natural Des, could you just, thanks, must not discharge wastewater directly to natural freshwater receiving environments. And I suppose some consideration and discussion around what directly means. And when I first read that, I assumed that there'd be no pipes, for example, putting wastewater into the natural freshwater. Or does it mean more than that in terms of potential seepage or whatever else? So I think some further discussion around that. Obviously any thinking today, but further discussion by the project team in terms of exactly what that means. So I'll open it up for any comments or around.
Sorry, I'm just picking up on this point where it talks about natural wetlands. We do have a constructed wetland over at Tauranga. So how does that kind of factor in here? So still using natural processes to resolve and deal with the discharge, but essentially it is a constructed wetland to try and manage that. So.
Great. We understand that that Ngā is still seeking direction, or needs to seek direction on whether that constructed wetland does provide sort of that cultural treatment, I guess. That was what was advised to us, and that I guess more generally we need to have sort of a shared understanding as to what good looks like and what is not good, and that needs to be done in terms of the PBC by the assessment stage, so that we can adequately appropriately assess different responses as to whether they are good or not good in that regard. Yeah, so we understand that is still outstanding, and that will come back to us in due course.
Can I ask what your view is on the first one, which is what's meant by direct?
To a natural freshwater receiving environment, that would be to awa, stream, river, lake, just trying to think of other freshwater bodies. So body of water. We would see groundwater differently. If we were looking at a land-based disposal system, the water would typically percolate through that land and end up in a groundwater system. So it's passing through so that we get more benefit out of them as far as the treatment and environmental treatment device goes. I'm just throwing that out there. So at the moment they are a habitat wetland more than a treatment wetland.
Whiti.
It was our kaumātua of the day back then. I think it was Uncle Bill and Uncle Turi and it was for treatment, not really for the park itself, so I'm looking for ways for it to be treated, because that's the last bit of treatment it'll sort of go through before it goes to the outfall A. And that's initially and essentially what we'd ask, why the old guys had asked for it to be formed like that, for treatment. And if you can make it a better treatment pond, all the better.
Yeah, my understanding was it was a tertiary treatment for both our treatment stations at Chapel Street and the proposed one there. And things have, since the Southern Pipeline, the scopes changed. Like it's become, Te Manga was built for the Mount Papamoa and Chapel was for Tauranga. And now there's two systems are for Tauranga and others. And I don't know where the level of treatment has been monitored over the years to still cope for that expansion, what's coming in with our current outputs with regards to the wire receiving, being able to take that. Everything's got a threshold, but without that, that's kind of a bit of an unknown as well around the trying to avoid these discharges, because when our system, the resilience of our system shows that not just out of the Te Manga scenario, but out there on the network scenario, that we have these spillages and breakages, and that requires another level of thought, discussion and assessment. So there's like a carrying capacity issue, and then there's a what if contingency issue. And I think the design parameters have changed because of the Southern Pipeline and the Western Bay influence and the UFTI influence with these new unanticipated growth areas coming on into the what was, when that was planned, the anticipated areas. So yeah, that's going to add, while we're having this point of discussion, a real impact on the carrying capacity of, when we talk about treatment, and the loss of these freshwater environments through a result of these wet weather events.
Yeah, I'll just, Dave said it, but when you're talking about directly to natural, like you said, we're not exactly going to put a pipe directly to a natural thing. It's when overflows happen, like you see, and just the capacity of the plant and wet weather events, because it will go directly into the Tahuna at the Mo and at Chapel Street out into the harbour. If it's overflow, wet weather, is that right? Yeah, and so that's what that's all about, really, is trying to avoid that, and that's what Des was talking about, the capacity of each plant to be able to handle wet weather events, so it doesn't overflow into the seawater or into any other freshwater environment.
Yeah, I guess just to remind the committee that since those wetlands were constructed and the Southern Pipeline's been put on, there has been an additional wetland put in. There was just wetlands A and B. We have constructed wetland C in accordance with that, and provide a lot more treatment and storage through the pond before it goes into wetland C. So it does receive a lot more treatment than it did back in the day, if you like, before these things happened. And we can talk about wet weather inflows another time, but we probably have the most watertight system in the country at the moment, and I know you're all aware of that. We've been through it several times. Yeah. I think we have a separate item on inflow and infiltration, which Brian Everett's going to talk to the committee on. So, shall we leave it for Brian when he comes?
Going back and picking up Wally's comment in terms of being also clear in terms of natural freshwater receiving environments vis-a-vis groundwater and such as that. So again, clarity around those types of matters also. Nothing further on CSF10? No? Oh, Des, you look poised there.
You're just thinking about, you know, how stormwater assessments are looking at the recharge of surface water. Would disposal to land be seen in the same light as factoring that into surface water? Because we're factoring it into groundwater. And what I'm getting at is the municipal water supply taking into account the rainwater and stormwater flows as recharge the surface water takes. It's really trying to get allocation for the rain, where the council don't allocate rain, but it's allocate surface water. Wouldn't you need to look at that aspect as well? And with regards to water, not just going seepages into groundwater, would you look at the same into surface water?
Certainly. Oh, I'll sit back. Can you turn yours off, please? So we are building a surface water, groundwater model and the interrelationships between the two. And it starts right at the top of the catchment of Tauranga and further over towards the ranges towards the Rotorua side. And it looks at the way the water moves through those streams and also through the ground, coming all the way down here, and the abstraction rates of water that we're taking, but also other users are taking through the Waiari, the Toto and Wairohi streams. So we're trying to get that water balance fully understood. We're doing that piece of work for renewing our consents for the water takes, but downstream of that, around Papamoa and the Mount Maunganui, we also have groundwater bores measuring groundwater levels in real time, and we're plotting those. So we understand those we don't understand them yet. We're trying to understand the interrelationships of that water as it passes from the mountains through to the sea, both the surface and groundwater. But of course there are a whole lot of abstraction points, and when we have big floods and big rains, well, that water just rushes through, as you know. That relationship between the groundwater changes. We're trying to understand that stuff. It's a joint piece of work with us, Western Bay and the Regional Council. Well, we're not applying wastewater to land at this point in time, so at this point in time it's not considered. Yep.
Okay, there's nothing further. That completes the three matters in terms of providing some input for the project team to go away, work through and then come back on those three particular matters. What I was going to suggest to the committee though is that obviously those three matters are set aside. There are a number of other recommendations there, including all those matters that have been agreed between the members of the project team. And I was going to suggest, if the members were happy, that we actually consider those recommendations, with the exception of C2, and I'm on page 19, and C2 relates to KSR 6. The other exception and not considering is CF17, which is Roman numeral C4, and also C6, which relates to CSF10. And then for today, deleting D and E. But in terms of all the other recommendations, I was proposing that we consider and hopefully be able to resolve on those. That also has the advantage of that when the team come back, the focus is clearly on those three matters that we have talked today, and the reporting will only be on that, not on all of the other matters. So I was proposing that. So yeah, I'm happy to move that if Spencer's seconding that. So, and being clear, that does not include C2, C4 and C6, nor does it include D or E, because they will come back in due course. Yes, yeah, for clarity. So Anna, here is just the ones highlighted in the yellow are the matters that we aren't resolving on today. Then the next page, and there's those ones 4 and 6 and D and E. So it excludes those. So is there, Des?
Kia ora, I'd like to leave this to Destiny to at this stage and vacate our seat. I have to go.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's all.
Yep,
So
Got another
she's
one.
been here and we've had our discussion.
Can you wait 30 seconds, because there's no further discussion. I was going to put those recommendations.
Oh yeah, I can. Yeah, but she knows my position.
So I've moved it, suggested by Spencer. Are there any further discussion on those recommendations? If there are not, I'll put that. All those in favour?
Aye.
Yes. Carried. So, matters. And yes, thanks Des, and noting that Destiny will be taking over as your alternate. Thank you. So that takes us to, where are we?
Bill, just while
Lara.
I will need to take my leave as well.
Okay.
Still pick up some 12 minutes, so I better get in real long.
Okay. Okay, no, thanks Lara. Where are we? Like to highlight? Wally.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just by way of introduction, you probably know Jim is our consents officer, looking after consents. At the time, he's also acting as the Wastewater Services Manager while Radley is overseas.
Cool, kia ora everyone. Anna Hera, is it possible to bring the presentation up?
It's on there. It's on the
So I'll just give you a run through on the activities since the last committee report. Is that better? Is that better? Cool, so let's start. So since the last committee meeting in regards to the discharge consent at Tauranga, all sampling has been within the consent limits, so not much to update on that one. So the seepage rates continue to be well within consent conditions, even with the de-sludge programme well underway.
We've reduced the pond level to the minimum level that we can, and this is to further reduce any seepage risk, which is working quite well. There's no odour complaints that have been received for Chapel Street or Tauranga wastewater treatment plant since the last committee meeting. In terms of emergency overflow discharge consents, both Chapel Street and Tauranga, there's been no discharges, which is great. In terms of wastewater overflows, since the last committee meeting in June 23, we've had 23 blockages that have been notified to council. 18 didn't leave the network and were contained to land. 2 discharged to the stormwater system, and 3 potentially made the receiving environment. These were all notified to Bay of Plenty Regional Council, Taitiara, and local iwi Hapu reps. Water quality sampling has been undertaken as per our standard protocol, and warning signage placed around relevant areas until sampling shows that there was no further impacts on water quality. In terms of inflow infiltration, I won't provide much of a commentary because Brian Everett, our engineer, is going to give a presentation after myself and give an update on what the TCC strategy is and our next steps. Moving on to the Tauranga upgrades, the desludging of Pond 1 is well underway. So to date we've removed over 6,000 dry tonnes since desludging began. Currently the programme is well on schedule. I've just included a recent photo on the right which shows you the top of Tip Lane, one of the sludge cells, which is where we're depositing the sludge from. So that was taken very recently. Since the last committee meeting, our contractor has moved to 24 hours operation. This is to remove as much sludge as we can. 2 sludge cells have been filled and stabilised with sawdust. The regional council, they undertook a site inspection under the consent that we have there for the desludging, and they were satisfied with the compliance. Moving on to other upgrades at Tauranga, Cry number 3, so the construction contract's been awarded to HEB and construction's commenced. Current work's completed, so the topsoil have been stripped. We've established on site sheet piles, and we've installed the dewatering system. The bulk excavation is due to commence in late September 2023. And our Podaki has been commissioned as well to provide cultural monitoring during the excavation works. Moving on to Bioreactor 2, since the last committee meeting, construction of the internal pile grids is complete. Piles have been tested and checked for compliance with the specification. Perimeter remedial works are currently in the planning phase and expected to commence in early October 2023. Delays have occurred, pushing the completion of the ground improvement works to March 24. Balance of the contract for the above ground works is scheduled to commence in April 2024 and take around about 50 months to complete. The photo on the right shows the current site establishment and the drill rigs in operation. The landward section of the outfall is now complete since the last committee meeting. Moving on to the marine section, so the marine outfall has been cleared of debris using our robot, which is showed here on the right. So remove the pieces of grout, and we've also inspected the line using CCTV. So the data is currently being assessed by consultants, and around about 6 to 9 weeks we're expected to have some results. New works, looking at the new inlet works, the work has commenced on decommissioning the existing odor bed and replacing it with a new one with a smaller footprint. This is anticipated to be completed in the third quarter of 2024. Work is progressing with the assessment of the new inlet works with a few concept options that we're looking at. Once the preferred one is selected, we'll start to commence that. The preliminary design of the new inlet works will commence on the third quarter of 2024, after the mechanical supply contracts have been awarded. We're also looking at conduct a number of ground investigations for geotechnical, groundwater and environmental for the new bioreactor 3 and picket fence thickener 3. Moving on to the EMEF fund, so the next steps since the last committee meeting, next steps are the appointment panel to assess and appoint the independent panel members which we've currently shortlisted. Once the panel's in place, the applications to the fund can open. And yeah, any questions on that?
Right, thanks, Jim. So I'll open it up for any questions or commentary around the table. Okay. I've got one question, Jim, and just in terms of that Environmental Mitigation and Enhancement Fund panel. So what's the time frame now? Because in terms of that process and getting to the stage where there is the consideration of applications, etc.
So earlier this year, Radley and myself interviewed a number of candidates that were selected as being adequately suitable to do the job. So they were interviewed, and we've got all of the 5 candidates. So we just need to sit down with the panel, and they make the final decision.
Okay.
So it's TCC's job to provide to recommend the candidates, but the appointment sits with EMEF panel members.
Okay. Just as an observation, be good to see all that progress, because presumably the fund continues to build up, and there have not been any applications granted, certainly since we as commissioners have been in place in the last 2.5 years.
Yeah, correct. I mean, it's still accruing money every year, so I couldn't give an exact figure on there, but I could find out. It's quite a lot in there. Yeah, can do.
Fitty.
Yeah, just a question. I don't know whether it's obvious or not. On 27 site investigations, I am presuming there'll be a cultural assessment in the site investigations as well, eh?
Yes, it will be 50.
Yeah. It's just that it wasn't noted in there, that's all.
There's nothing. Fitty.
By now, Portuguese.
Okay. Jim, did you want to?
Yeah, we can hand over to Brian Everett, who's going to give a presentation on the inflow and infiltration strategy.
Okay. Welcome, Brian.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brian Everett. I'm the team leader of engineering services in City Waters, and I'm going to be presenting on our management strategy for inflow and infiltration. The engineering services team provides mechanical and electrical maintenance services to City Waters, and we provide engineering service support in planning projects and operations, as well as asset management to the 3 activities. Ah. Yeah. connecting it again. Right, so the session outline briefly is, I'll just touch on again to, if, I don't know if everybody knows what inflow infiltration is, so I'll just touch on that. I will go through how we doing in Tauranga, some of our KPIs, look at the new strategy that we put together last year, and just discuss our forward works plan. That picture there is the consequences of the inflow and infiltration. I won't talk about how we deal with what's coming out. I'm trying to avoid it going in to start with. So what is inflow and infiltration? The flows in the wastewater pipes consist of three sources mainly. One of them is the dry weather flow. The dry weather flow in those diagrams is indicated with the brown bit at the bottom. That is either residential or approved authorised commercial discharges. The other aspect is rainfall derived inflow and infiltration. So that's anything that's derived through rainfall. It could include water coming in through gully traps, through cracks in the network, whether that's through private laterals or the public network. And the other aspect is we can get groundwater infiltration as well. That's where our network gets submerged as the groundwater table rises. The network gets submerged, and once again we'll get water coming in through the cracks in the network. Almost all of our gravity networks receive some sort of inflow and infiltration. It's just the quantity of this depends on the age, the construction materials, and really the quality of the network itself. Consequences of the inflow and infiltration will be obviously reduced capacity, increased OPEX because you've got to pump all that extra water. We can wash out the treatment processes, which are biologically activated, which is all the brown stuff at the bottom. We don't want that diluted too much. And also, if we have too much inflow and infiltration, we have to spend additional money on additional infrastructure to convey and treat it. As I mentioned, some of the sources are both on the public and the private networks. What we find is it's very often a sort of a 50-50 split where it's coming from. It is coming from our faults on our public network, be that manhole infiltration, manhole defects, or pipe cracks, but also a lot of it comes in from the private networks through the gully traps or the private laterals from the house to our public network that are cracked and damaged that need some repair. When we're looking for it, what we do try and look for is those spikes in our flows. That graph there shows a time bound on the bottom. We get some rainfall as shown in the top graph. That rainfall displays as a peak in flow, the total flow shown there on those graphs. And then what we've got to do is actually work out how much of those peaks are actually inflow versus just the normal dry weather flows. There's a lot of uncertainty around that, and we spend a lot of time and effort trying to get that information correct. So how are we doing? Modelling, our theoretical modelling suggests that our average is about 1.2% I&I factor. The range is from about 0.3 to 2.5%. Many other cities and towns in New Zealand sort of have typically sort of 5 to 10%. So overall, we're doing reasonably well. The figure that we have for inflow infiltration is very dependent on what we call antecedent conditions. That's the environmental conditions at the time. So, for example, if we've got very dry soils and an environment, the runoff seems to be a lot higher. The soil doesn't absorb it, the rainfall as quickly, so we get a lot of runoff. But if we've got a very sort of wet, saturated soil, a lot more of the rainfall gets absorbed in, and so we get a slightly different response. Very often the worst response is if you're getting a lot of runoff that goes into the gully traps. That's when you get the real big peaks. So that's what we try and sort of manage the most. Those figures there are based on modelling. Our observations support that. There's a New Zealand guide for the management and control of inflow and infiltration, which has some very complex KPIs to measure. We've done a lot of those on our catchments, and all those figures support the theoretical modelling as well. So just a couple more indicators. That's the last 10 years. Apologies, I don't know what happened in the first two in terms of our measurements, but the last 10 years, number of overflows on the right-hand column in the blue graphs, and the rainfall for the year in the red line, and you can see the sort of intuitive correlation between rainfall and inflow and infiltration. With wetter years clearly showing higher levels, and dry years easing off. Another KPI, this is now from the last financial year's 2021-22 financial year, our benchmarking. We do benchmarking annually against councils, and that shows Tauranga in blue there, our inflow as 0.142 overflows per 10 kilometre of pipes, and you can see that compares very favourably. In fact, we're below the average for any of those categories of councils around the country. I'll move on to some of the activities we've done to date. So we've done a lot of work since 2008 till the last few years, till probably 2020 when COVID hit, and things sort of slowed down a little bit. But we looked at 45 catchment areas, so that was looking at those peaking flows through different catchments. We'd pick up those trends and prioritise the ones that were peaking the most. And we went out and did a lot of investigating through manhole inspections, smoke testing, gully trap inspections, CCTV inspections, as well as flow gauging, where we make smaller catchments within the catchment just to understand where the flows are coming from, to pinpoint us to where the problems might actually be. To give you an indication of what some of those things are that I just spoke about, this is some photos from smoke testing we've done around the city. So what we do is we fill the wastewater network with smoke, and then we inspect the entire public and private network in the catchment area that we're observing. So the photograph on the right hand side, you can see smoke coming out somebody's garden, so that's clearly their lateral is broken, so you can imagine rain falls on that and it just goes straight into the network. The photograph on the right shows smoke coming out of a stormwater catch pit or entry. That one, in fact, that's a genuine stormwater downpipe into a genuine stormwater gully. But what happened was, on that particular property, the entire stormwater of the property was connected to the wastewater, and the wastewater was connected to the stormwater. So it's these sort of things that our inspections are sort of picking up. It's not all that common we find those, but there's definitely some of them out there. Then other inspections we do is individual property inspections. The photograph on the right, you can see somebody has diverted their rainfall downpipes from their roofs into their gully traps and wastewater. The two pictures in the middle show gully traps that are at ground level, so water obviously just runs straight into them. And then the picture of the bottom right corner actually is the same one as the one next to it on the left, but after we actually put out a notice to the property owner asking them just to correct their gully trap. We get very good response to that. People are normally very sort of cooperative, trying to assist, and so they've gone and raised their gully trap, makes it compliant, and reduces the overall impact.
Kia ora, I'm presuming you can't do too much apart from finding each of old houses or development where you said that stormwater is connected to the wastewater pipe and vice versa. To avoid that from here on in, I mean, is every new build inspected like that, given like a certificate of compliance that it's not hooked up mixed up from here on in with all new builds, or and I'm talking about every new house that's going up, and making sure that that system is not overflowing into the stormwater and that.
Yeah, so those are all inspected, but through our strategy, which I'll explain later, we actually want to work with our building services team to see if we can improve those. That is actually all part of our proactive work to actually try and improve some of those inspections. So those are the exact sort of things that we're starting to look at more. So the next one is we do a lot of CCTV inspection. So this is we drive a camera up the pipes, an automated camera, and a lot of the inspection is done through our asset management team. They've got a whole program of condition assessment. So we link into that, but we also look at some of our priority areas and put CCTV inspections for inflow and infiltration into that overall CCTV inspection program. The photograph on the right is quite a bad example, which I don't think is actually from our network, but certainly the two in the middle, they're from our network, and they're probably more typical of what you'd see as sort of damage to the public network and leakage. And then with a growing city like we have, a lot of the services are done with underground directional drilling. So it's not uncommon for us to find services have been drilled through our wastewater pipes, which we once again have to correct. So our I&I strategy was rewritten in 2022, so that was last year, to provide a more of a proactive focus. Previously we were quite reactive. We'd sort of find problems and then sort of try and reactively address them with inspections, but the new strategy aims to be a bit more proactive and look at the root causes of some of these problems so we can eliminate them at the time of happening. The example would have been the building inspections. So a lot of the focus of the new strategy is around being a bit more proactive in the program. And the reason for that is our I&I is generally quite low. So what we're aiming to try and do is to maintain that. The New Zealand guidelines suggest that the level of inflow and infiltration we have is below the sort of economic threshold to really jump into it in a major way. But what we're trying to do is be really proactive and actually maintain where we are, because we know our network is aging and deteriorating as time goes on. So the new strategy is a lot of strategy. It's got pillars, and the first one of those is about prevention. One of the ones that we're looking to do is to look at the infrastructure development code. So that's the code that all infrastructure around the cities is developed to. It's the specifications, quality codes, approved materials. So we're working to improve our processes, working with the asset services team who administer that IDC, as well as our operations networks teams to make improvements as we see fit in those. Once we identify problems with particular materials, we'll try and get them changed in the IDC so we don't actually have them in the future. We're looking to improve the monitoring of development approvals and implement improvements for inspections where appropriate. So this is where we'll work with the regulatory compliance building inspection teams. We'll look to monitor the quality control processes through our capital works delivery. So that's both the public works, capital works, as well as the private, which is the developers works, through our development engineering teams. So we work with our development engineering teams quite closely just to make sure that they do the sufficient checks prior to actually accepting the infrastructure across to ourselves. The next pillar is around issues identification. So that really focuses on trying to work out which are the priority areas that we need to spend money on doing investigations for. So we look through with the network model. That's a well advanced model now. and calibrated, so it provides us good insights into where there might be some inflow and infiltration to investigate. We look at all our data. We've got huge amounts of operational data coming in. All those spikes that I showed you in the graph at the beginning, they're in there. They're all at our pump stations, so we can monitor all 150 pump stations, 170 I think we have. Try and look up those to try and prioritize. The next pillar would be our implementation programs. So the idea is to actually develop up a number of programs that focuses on rehabilitation of both the public and the private networks. So the public network is easy, we've got access to that, we can do it. The private network at the moment, we rely very much on letters out to property owners, and we probably need to improve our ability to work on probably more expensive aspects of that, which might be renewing laterals. If we had to renew all the laterals, it's quite a lot of money to do that, so in certain households it might be an expensive exercise. So we need to work through how we actually achieve those improvements. And then the final pillar of the strategy will be the review. So we've implemented a plan to annually review the performance of the I&I of the network, and as well as a 3-yearly program to look at the effectiveness of the program over the 3 years, and tweak it in line with where we need to go, but in preparation for LTP. So we've aligned those overall 3-yearly review programs with the LTP cycles, as well as with our model build cycles.
Could you go back to that, the implementation? Just a comment for the prioritised repairs and renewals. I think overall the full council strategy of engagement with the ratepayers would be a critical component of that, generally the engagement by council with their ratepayers, so you can virtually knock on their door and say, can we check your pipes? At the moment you'll be getting it from one of go away and the other one sure. Hey, you know what I mean? So
yes, so sorry, just on that one, there is actually a note here which I didn't actually mention in the prevention aspect. Is actually education and information. So that is engaging with the public on a broader scale about what I&I is, so that they can maybe do some self-inspections, but also we've sort of got initiatives to actually work through the likes of the plumbers and gas fitters or drain layers associations. So work through the plumbers. You often see some of these things on the private networks as well. So we've sort of made some contacts with those organisations as well, and we want to try and sort of foster some of those the working together with them. Yep. Excuse me. So the strategy was put together last year. So this year we have done a combined overall review and setting the way forward. And a lot of that report was around pulling together the last 12 years of information into a single graphical interface database using a GI system. So all that work is now being collated into the database and gives us a much better overview of how we're doing, what we've done, and the ability to assess those catchments a bit better through our modelling process as well. What we also did was put together a methodology to prioritise our catchments a bit better. In the past, as I said, we were just looking mainly at where the peaks are, but we've got a whole bunch more indicators now that are going into that prioritisation process through the SCADA analysis, the looking at overflows that we've had, looking at the modelling as well. Out of that has come a list of prioritised catchments for further assessment, as well as a list of business process improvements to implement. So the catchments that we're going to be looking at in the next few years will be the Naita Road catchment. That's the purple one on the left-hand side there. That's one that keeps on giving. We've done quite a lot of work in that catchment to date already, but it's proving quite difficult to get to the bottom of it. Very often this is the case with I&I. You're sort of almost looking for a needle in a haystack sometimes. So we've got a bit more work to do in Naita Road. We'll be doing some work over at the Mount Industrial area. That's an area that's also been identified for network upgrades through the LTP, so we'll be working closely with our planning team for us to look at the I&I aspects of that as well. As they're looking to upgrade the size of the mains, we'll look at how we can manage the I&I to actually optimise that capital spend on that program. The next one is Titoki Place. It's the green one in the middle around Bayfair. Once again, we'll just do some gauging there and some property inspections. We've got a small catchment at Mangatawa Lane that we identified some problems with. It's quite a small catchment, so we'll be doing some additional work out there. At Ashley Place in Pakmar, once again, just identified some work with inflow and property inspections to be done, and then same at Anchorage Grove and Anchorage Grove, Mangatapu. Business process improvements that we're going to sort of identify, as I mentioned some of the previous ones, but there is quite a lot of data accumulation that we need to do as well. Make sure we actually accumulate the data as we're collecting it. In the past, to be fair, we haven't collated all that data very well. These programs tend to be quite long rolling programs. We tend to do work beforehand to measure what we've got, and then do some work, and then you might get a dry spell, so you don't get any rain, so you've got to wait till the rain comes to actually assess whether you've achieved what you wanted to. So it's quite a long rolling process, which we do need to get better with, so that's why we're putting these databases in place as well. And then the final aspect of any sort of plan is the budgets. So that's the budget that we've allocated. You'll notice the first few years are a little bit lighter than the previous or the subsequent ones. So overall there's about $5.25 million of work there, starting off in the first 3 years with quite a lot of assessment work, and expecting that we will be ramping up investments in capital improvements as the program evolves. And then in this year's financial budget we have some budget available to engage with the program manager just to try and get some momentum to this as well. And that's our program. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take any further questions.
Thanks, Brian. Any further questions in terms of Brian? Whitty?
Just to compliment you there, bro, that was very informative for me. I managed to follow everything there, so thank you very much. There was a lot of detail, and hopefully it will improve our network and eventually restore our environment. So.
Brian, is there and you outlined earlier on the presentation in terms of, by comparison with other cities and towns, we have quite a low infiltration rate. Is there any particular reduction target in mind, given the investment over, say, the next 10 years that you've outlined?
So as I mentioned, the main objective of our strategy is to maintain what we've got, and that'll link into containment standards, which at the moment I think is 1 and 2 year storms, that we're trying to manage the system to contain a 1 and 2 year storm. In terms of an absolute target for I&I percentage, we haven't got one specifically. It sort of ranges, and I think if you've got to be careful not to just set yourself a target, because you could be investing a lot of money to achieve a target which is actually not really causing you a major problem. If you're not getting the overflows, and you don't need to spend $5 million to save $5,000 of pumping costs, well then you wouldn't want to spend $5 million sort of thing. So that's why we haven't been putting specific generic I&I targets, but we will look at, for example, we look at the the New Zealand guideline has got guidelines as to when you should get involved, and typically that's at about the 5% level and above. So anything below that is reasonably good for us, and so that's what we're trying to maintain. Yeah. I don't know if that's answered the question.
Just before you said that, I was going to say 0. But I understand what you just said there, bro. So, okay.
Oh, hello again, everyone. So before I start, I'd just like to acknowledge the work of Bradley Cairns, the Spaces and Places team, and Hannah Sherritt, who helped put the report together. So I'm just going to run you through a breakdown of the report, just in the presentation. I've just got some photos, and just to provide a bit more context. Any questions, just interrupt me. I'm happy to answer as I go. So to start with, I guess you're all aware that the climate change is upon us. You know, we're experiencing quite a few different weather events. So I just included these photos on the, which I thought was quite appropriate. So this one shows the Auckland floods that happened in 2023. The bottom left is what I took from NIWA's website. So this was the very dry summer we had in 2015. So yeah, the climate is becoming a lot more variable. So TCC, we're committed to maintaining and enhancing the health of our source water streams. So these are from NIWA's website. So you can see this is a seasonal outlook for October to December 2023. So in terms of rainfall, we can see that it's going to be, it's going to be quite low. And looking at the temperature as well, it's going to be forecast to be quite a hot summer as well. So we're going to have little rainfall with potentially increased temperatures. Also, in terms of like the soil moisture, so again, this is taken from NIWA's website, so it shows the predictions for October to December this year. So soil moisture levels got quite a high probability that it's going to be quite dry this year. So this is a prediction for October to December, that given the current climatic conditions, it's anticipated to continue into the summer months. So as we currently know, Tauranga Wastewater System, so currently we discharge via an outfall that's 950 metres offshore. Any part of the reconsent of the network or the discharge is through the programme business case, and part of the alternative options that we're looking at for disposal would be potentially the reuse of treated wastewater. The use of treated wastewater is quite commonly used in arid and semi-arid parts of the world to address water shortage. In parts of New Zealand, it's also used. Historically, in the past, we've also used irrigated wastewater and a minor golf course. Coming back to what TCC do, so we've introduced the Water Watchers Plan, which is part of a citywide plan to manage and protect the water all year round. The Water Watchers Plan is focused on establishing good water practices, whether or not it's in drought conditions or wet weather. We all have to adapt our habits and use water more sustainably going into the future. So up here I've just highlighted from our website just the Water Watchers Plan. So again, just to reiterate, it just restricts the use of sprinklers, water blasters, filling pools at specific parts of the day. So the aim is to have a plan in place before we meet those before those demands occur. So currently, for the Spaces and Places team, any water use that falls outside of the standard approvals need a smart water plan. So for watering street trees and gardening, the Spaces and Places team are required to submit a smart water plan during the month of December to March for watering these facilities. Currently, bore water is used to irrigate a sports field. However, just to highlight, these are all in minimum requirements. So where we plant new trees, it can take quite a long time to establish. Puts the trees under quite a bit of stress, and just takes them a lot longer to establish because of the restrictions that are getting put in place due to the water plans. The environment strategy and the nature and biodiversity action plan will see a need for more street trees to be planted across the city. These trees will support climate change mitigation, provide amenity, and ensure the council meets targets for increased tree capacity and indigenous vegetation. However, this will increase the demand for water, like we said, until the plantings have reached a certain level of maturity. I'll just go and look at some case studies now. So Kinloch is in Taupo, New Zealand, so there's an 18-hole golf course there, and nearby there's the Kinloch wastewater treatment plant, and what they do there is they pump the treated wastewater from the plant to the golf course and irrigate the fields that way. So currently it's about 5 hectares of fairways. This method that they use is a subsurface drip system. So I've just highlighted this on the right here. So it's installed in the first 200 to 300 mil where you get that root zone, and irrigated that way. The whole process is authorised by a consent. The golf course has been operating this for a fair number of years, and from discussions that we've had with Taupo, with the golf course, and Taupo Council, it's widely regarded as being successful. Radley is currently touring the wastewater treatment plants in the USA, and they found this really cool example in Brentwood, California. So this shows you a picture on the right here showing an automatic fill station. So the residents of Brentwood can go and sign up, fill out an application form, get an access card, and rock up to one of these fill stations 24/7 and just take as much irrigated water as they like. There's only a requirement, it's more of a weight requirement for vehicles, I believe. So that's quite a good system. I looked on the website and I pulled this off. This is a one-time application form that they fill in. It lists a lot of requirements on there of what you can and can't do with it, some of them fairly obvious. So once they fill this in, they receive an access card, and they can go and have as much water as they like. That was quite a cool system. Coming back to TCC, we do have an irrigation consent for treated wastewater. So this was authorised October 2005. In the consent, it lists a number of locations where we can use this, which I've just highlighted on the right. We used to use this on a minor golf course, and I believe it was stopped due to an odour issues being detected during the long summer months, so therefore it was discontinued. However, since that was last used, which was 2008, technology has improved quite a lot, so it's quite unlikely there would be any detectable odour now. But yeah, the consent is still valid, expires in 2040, but currently we don't use it. So next steps, with the requirement for greenification, this is only ever going to increase. So we would like to explore the use of treated wastewater for irrigation of street trees and gardens. So we're quite keen to investigate a trial using the treated wastewater along newly planted trees along Maunganui Road and the Papamoa area. I've just highlighted a few of these locations. I'm sure you're familiar with Maunganui Road. These I've just taken from Google Images. We've got this is just a very small example of the amount of street trees that there are, which would benefit from watering. So we do acknowledge this would require significant, like consenting, potentially health and safety, as well as operational reports before reporting back to the committee. So what we'd like is to understand, the potential positives and negatives from the committee, and whether you would support the staff continuing to investigate such a trial. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Happy to take any questions and open for discussion.
Okay. Thanks, Jim. Certainly from my point of view, I'd like to see the further investigations and the trial, and picking up that commitment that the council have made, both in the additional greening of the city and that commitment in terms of not just in the future but the planting that's already occurred, in terms of street trees and also in parks and reserves. So, but I'll open it up for any other questions or comments. Spencer.
Thank you. Obviously, I'm not much of a technician when it comes to water and irrigation and the like, so I don't know if I can engage on the actual technical matters, other than to say I am interested in the comment in your report around getting some feedback from tangata whenua and what that looks like. Obviously, I'm the wrong tangata to do that, but I am interested. I'm okay with you progressing the study and the investigation, but I am interested in how getting that feedback and getting that technical feedback from some of our experts going to happen.
I don't really have a question, just kind of a comment. I'm kind of interested in, I suppose, we've been talking about our water system over the last couple of years since the commission's been in, and thinking about more efficient ways to use our current supply. I mean, we've just built a $200 million water treatment plant with high quality treated water that would then go and water people's gardens. So yeah, if we can find alternatives to do some of that. I suppose the bit I'm interested in is, over time, what could we interested in, I suppose, in terms of quantities that we could take out of the system, and find alternative uses for. And I'd be interested in the tangata whenua feedback, thinking about, is this a land-based kind of treatment system? So if there's appetite for land-based, then this is potentially an alternative, and reduce the amount of water that's actually being discharged out into the moana. So, and then over time, how do we kind of grow that while reducing discharge. So, yeah.
Before you come back on that, can I tack on my other question, which was where would the treated wastewater come from? Is it out of the wetland at Tauranga or somewhere else?
We'll be looking to take it from the end of the pipe, so that's after it's been treated. How that would look, we're not sure. Operationally, we think it's possible. But yeah, we wouldn't be taking it from the wetlands. That's not our intent. After it's been disinfected, yeah.
So the effluent, excuse me, the effluent goes through the wetlands and then gets collected into the outfall pump station, goes through the UV plant and then out sea. So it'll be after the UV disinfection. And when we did the trials for this back, when this consent was first issued for those 8 sites, we put out a whole lot of trays with one of the professors from Auckland University to measure viruses from the aerosols in, because these were the type sprinklers rather than the little drippers, subsurface drippers. Unfortunately, after UV treatment, we couldn't detect any viruses. So we had to turn the UV off and then get some mug in a raincoat to go out there and get these. I was the mug in the raincoat underneath these sprinklers getting the samples. So, yeah. So, Richie, if you've got that commitment, mate, we've got a job for you. So yes, it can be done. I expect it would be small to start with, possibly. You'll be looking at a water cart type of arrangement. Yeah. Yeah, rather than putting more pipes all the way through the city. The issue that we did have with the irrigation system last time round was UV disinfection does not have a residual. It's not like chlorine. So we got growth in the pipes after time, and that's what created some of the odour. Those growths growing within the pipes because there's no residual disinfectant.
From my telling perspective, tautoko what you're trying to do and achieve there. Only thing I'll say is that need more sites on the Tauranga side here, mostly all on the Mount side. No, that's all I got to say about that, really. But and you're right, Shed, because we've been pushing to the ground, onto the whenua instead of out to the ocean. So this is a good start,
Stephen. Well, I've got some wording here, Stephen, in terms of item B, was to actually for the committee to support the investigation into the reuse of treated wastewater for watering street trees and potentially other locations. And then I took it from the report you intend to come back to the committee as a result of those investigations before you undertake the trial, is that correct? Or is the trial part of the investigations?
We can't do a trial without a resource consent, so because they're site specific. So it'll be investigations first, then consult, come up with some potential trial sites, get consents, and then have a look at what can be done. There's quite a process to go through, I'm afraid.
Not sure on that. We'll have to have a look into it and let you know.
Yeah. Well, there might be the opportunity to do some lysimeter tests in the meantime, just on site. Put some trees in a contained environment so that if any spillages happen around those trees and say pots, that water goes back into the effluent system, and we could actually trial different watering rates for trees or something with the effluent on a controlled site. But it wouldn't be natural. But at least we can see how they survive and how they grow compared to other trees around the city or whatever at that time. But that's something we can talk to Spaces and Places about.
Tēnā koe Bill, I whakahaere nei tēnei huihoinga me ki rā kia tātou katoa. Kia kōrua tahi e mahu e mai, tēnā kōrua ria ki rā kia tātou katoa tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou. Just want to acknowledge you, Bill, for chairing our meeting this afternoon, and for our committee members and for those that have had to depart early, and to staff for their presentations today. I'll just close with a short karakia. Nō reira kia nui tātou. E te atua anei anō rā mātou e huitahi nei, ka tuku anō rā ngā whakamoemetinga whakawhetai ki a koe. Tono mai rā anō rā tō ringa kaha ki runga i a mātou. A te rā wā, ka huitahi anō, ka te whiriwhiri hia anō rā tātou. Wēnei kaupapa, nō reire te atua tēnei mātou, nui tēnei ki a koe, korore ki tōnga tapu. Āmene.